Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for being here. My name is Bonnie Brzozowski. I'm a public services librarian at the Corvallis Benton County Public Library. I want to welcome you today to our event, A Gift for Jackson Fraser Wetland, with our presenter, Phil Hayes, with the Alliance for Recreation and Natural Areas. And we'll also get to hear from our event coordinator, Dave Eckert, the program chair for the Mary's Peak group of the Sierra Club. This event is part of the Bob and Liz Frankel Hiking and Environment Spring Lecture Series. Each presentation in this series will announce a large gift from the late Liz and Bob Frankel to a specific natural area in the Corvallis-Benton County area, including how the gift will be used for the public good. Our next two events are on April 21st and May 26th. If you would like to register, I'm going to put those links in the chat right now. There we go. So you should have a few links there, a link to more information about the Mary's Peak group of the Sierra Club, and then info for registering for the Mary's Peak, A Gift for Mary's Peak event. That one is on April 21st. And then the gift for the Denawi Creek Regeneration Site, which is on May 26th. So I hope you'll register and join us for those. These events, if you don't already know, are sponsored by the Mary's Peak group of the Sierra Club, as well as the Corvallis-Benton County Public Library. If you're new to GoToWebinar, the platform that we're using today, please just allow me a moment to sort of orient you. So you should see a box or a bar, usually in the top right corner or near the right corner of your screen. There's an orange box near the top of that bar with a white arrow, and this will expand as well as hide your options that are available to you. Options that are available to you, you should see when I send any links or anything, those will come through your chat. But you also have a box where you can ask questions or provide comments throughout the entire event. So feel free to send us any questions and any comments as we go. We are going to have a question and answer period at the end where we can talk with Phil and Dave. So if you come up with any questions, please keep them coming, and I'll make sure that they get asked at the end as long as we have enough time to get through them all. So with that said, we should get started. I would like to invite Dave Eckert, our event organizer and the program chair for the Mary's Peak group of the Sierra Club, on screen with us. Dave, would you like to join us?
Sure. Can you all hear me? Raise your hand. Okay, great. Well,
Sounds
thank
great.
you, Bonnie. That we're so grateful that you're hosting this, you and the library. Well, 3 years ago, the Mary's Peak group, the Sierra Club, renamed our spring lecture series after Liz and Bob Frankel to retell the story of their work as both the founders and the foundation of the Mary's Peak group. When Bob and Liz lived in Berkeley, Bob was deeply involved with the national headquarters of the Sierra Club. When he joined the faculty at OSU, Liz and Bob initiated and organized the Mary's Peak group of the Sierra Club and the Oregon State chapter. Liz became the club's state legislative lobbyist and became a formidable force in Salem, influencing legislation and training other lobbyists. I remember the moment I met Liz in the state capitol building, and I knew I wanted to be on her team. Liz and Bob mentored me on much of my work that I do now. The Frankels left large financial gifts to environmental organizations in Benton County. The series this year presents stories about 3 sites special to the Frankels and to you and to me. Next slide. And the next slide, yeah, sorry, I was a little slow on that. We are presenting this series from the land called Champinefu. It was named by the Ampinefu Kalapuya who nurtured this land, these waters, these geological features, and native species for at least 500 generations. In 1857, they were forcibly removed by the US government to the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde Reservation. Some Kalapuya went to the Confederated Tribes of Slits Indians Reservation. Surprising to many current local residents of Benton County, Kalapuya culture is alive, and Kalapuya are living on this land. We in the Sierra Club acknowledge, recognize, and honor the Kalapuya and Kalapuya culture. We work to preserve the soil, the water, air, geological features, and the native species that support the living Kalapuya culture, so it can continue and thrive for far more than another 500 generations in the land of Champinefu. Next slide. For those who are not familiar with the local Sierra Club, the Mares Peak Group represents 5 counties: Benton, Lynn, Marion, Polk, and Lincoln. Every state has a state chapter, as does Oregon. The national organ of the Sierra Club is located in Oakland, California. Next. We support sustaining healthy and living air, soil, water, native species, and geological features. And we do this by taking people on hikes and inspiring appreciation of the environment that supports us all. Next slide. We hold programs that are educational and public tours of special environmental features. Next. We also plant native species, a lot of them, and work with both students and adults to make this process integral to everyone's lives. Next. And many of these plantings are along local creeks to spawn appreciation of our local living waters. Next. We also have a digital weekly newsletter that is free and available to everyone who requests it. Just search for Mares Peak Group and click on this part of the website. Next. We are a membership organization, but participation in activities is open to all, the whole public. Next. The Gift Trilogy is about the Frankel's gift to 3 organizations for 3 natural area sites in Benton County. Today's presentation is about a gift to Afrana for the Jackson Fraser wetland. Next. As Bonnie stated, we have 2 more programs coming up about the gift to Mares Peak, Alliance of Afrana for Mares Peak, and on the 26th of May about the gift to the Corvallis Sustainability Coalition to regenerate the headwaters of Dennery Creek and the Bald Hill Natural Area. Next. Well, our presenter today is Phil Hayes. Phil has lived in Corvallis since 1984. Phil has a PhD in microbiology from OSU in 1978. He is a member of the Oregon Native Plant Society and an amateur botanist. Phil met Bob and Liz when he joined the Mares Peak Group Executive Committee in the late 1980s. He became the group's newsletter editor. He learned firsthand about the Jackson Fraser wetland, environmental and legal issues from Bob and Liz. Phil joined the Benton County Natural Areas Park Advisory Board in 1990. At the time, the board acquired Jackson Fraser wetland. Phil was on that county park board for 30 years. He was the park board liaison to Bob Frankel's Jackson Fraser Wetland Technical Advisory Committee when the wetland was first being regenerated. Phil has witnessed firsthand the county's development of the wetland through all these decades. Flash forward to the present, and Phil is on the board of directors for the Alliance for Recreation and Natural Areas, Afrana, in Benton County, and is its treasurer. He personally managed the receipt of the large financial gift from the Frankel family for the Jackson Fraser wetland, and Phil is the singular person responsible for using the Frankel donations to improve the wetlands. Jackson Fraser is a personal matter for Phil and has been for over 30 years. He wants the wetland to be managed in a way Bob and Liz would approve. In fact, Phil is the only person that could give this presentation. I give you over to Phil, and hopefully we're going to see his website. There you go. Onward, Phil.
Thank you, Dave. Well, most of you probably know Jackson Fraser wetland is a popular walking and birding place and a habitat for native plants and wildlife, including several threatened and endangered species. This wetland exists today primarily through the efforts of Bob and Liz Frankel. Pardon me a moment. Why are we? There we go. Robert Frankel was a professor in geography department at Oregon State University, specializing in biogeography. Liz Frankel held a degree in history and, as Dave said, was statewide lobbyist for the Oregon and Sierra Club and Illegal Women Voters. Together they made a really powerful team working for natural areas conservation. They recognized the significance of Jackson Fraser wetland and led the battle to preserve it from development. Bob was the visible public advocate for saving the wetland, while Liz worked behind the scenes pulling strings in Salem. Now, Jackson Fraser, as you all know, is a natural area north of Corvallis. It's managed by the Benton County Natural Areas and Parks. The wetland is dependent upon water draining from the hills to the west and northwest in Oregon State University's McDonald Forest and draining down Fraser Creek and Jackson Creek into the wetland. Fraser Creek flows in from the northwest, and an intermittent stream comes in from the west from the adjacent Owens Farm property. This water flows in and fills most of this area with shallow pools in the winter. It drains out to the northeast through Fraser Ditch and south through Village Green Creek along Lancaster Avenue. The primary water flow is shown in the blue lines here. In the summer and fall, though, it dries up, so most of the area is dry. Now, the northern and eastern parts of the property are covered with riparian ash woodlands and the shrubs, and the central and southern part are wet prairie. Residential areas of the city of Corvallis are along its south border, and the surrounding area is mostly farmed. And of course, there's the boardwalk. The 2/3 mile Bob Frankel boardwalk winds through the property, allowing visitors to experience many aspects of the wetland without damaging the sensitive habitat. And Jackson Fraser is home to many native wetland species and plants and animals, prairie plants and animals. It's subject to the Benton County Prairie Species Habitat Conservation Plan. The goal is to protect and enhance prairie species, including several threatened and endangered species found in the wetland. We have Bradshaw's desert parsley, Kincaid's lupin, and Nelson's checker mallow growing there, and they are federal and state listed threatened and endangered species. And there are many species of birds in the wetland year round, but especially when the area is flooded in winter and spring. So this brings up a question: what is a wetland? Well, all wetlands share three essential features. First of all, they're wet, at least part of the year. And that prolonged saturation is what creates a wetland. The wetland or hydric soils have distinctive visible characteristics such as a brownish red veining and rusty colored splotches. And the saturated conditions support plants that are adapted to grow in permanently or seasonally wet soils. Jackson Fraser is one of few remaining protected wetlands in the Willamette Valley. If you go back to the earliest surveys after settlers started coming in, nearly a third of the wetland was prairie, wet prairies in the low areas and upland prairies in higher elevations. This was surrounded by oak savannas in the hills, and riparian forest lined the rivers and streams. There were, in the wettest places, there were several thousand acres of emergent wetlands just scattered all throughout the valley. Never was a lot of wetland. This land had been cultivated for millennia by the native Kalapuya people with periodic burning. The fire killed shrubs and small trees that invaded these open spaces and left the land open to native plant, insect, and animal species. So take a look at the green on that map and now look at it today. Today, nearly all the native prairie has been eliminated by development and farming. Less than 0.01%, that's 1 part in 10,000 of the prairie survives today, mostly in protected natural areas. Perhaps a third of the original wetlands remain, and most of the original riparian forest is gone. I want to talk a little bit now about the political history of this place, and it's pretty complicated. So bear with me on this. Jackson Fraser wetland was of crucial importance in determining Oregon's land use laws. The validity and interpretation of city, county, and state land use planning laws hinged on the outcome of the fight over this wetland. And before it was settled, the process involved almost every level of city, county, state, and federal government. The conflict was between a land developer and a pro-development county government on one side, and scientists, preservation groups, and the State Land Commission on the other. It's an excellent example of the many land management problems that arise from conflicting economic, environmental, and regulatory issues. Pardon me a minute. Okay. Now, the wetland was part of the William Knott's donation land claim in 1849. The blue line here is the outline of the donation land claim. Jackson Fraser wetland was here. There's also included Owens Farm property, which is over here. The southeast corner was deeded to a succession of owners until it was sold to T.J. Starker in 1969. And if you've been around here long, you've heard of T.J. Starker. He unsuccessfully petitioned the county to zone the area for industrial use. It had been zoned for urban residential, which would allow housing on the land with a lot of restrictions for drainage and septic systems because it's a wetland. During all this time, the wetland was never planted or farmed because of poorly drained heavy soils. The land was included in the unofficial growth planning area for the city of Corvallis. They thought that in the 70s, they thought the population of Corvallis would be 100,000 by the year 2000. Fortunately, it isn't. Things changed in 1973 when the state of Oregon adopted Oregon Senate Bill 100, the land use planning laws. The laws were intended to reduce urban sprawl and protect important farm and forest land from development. The law required cities to develop urban growth boundaries and restrict development to within these boundaries. Goal 5 of the law required the counties to inventory wetlands, natural areas, and wildlife corridors. And if the resource was significant, the county was required to protect that area from development. This brought the Jackson Fraser wetland into the center of the fight over the new land use laws. Draft plans had to be submitted to State Department of Land Conservation and Development for review, and then had to be approved by the Oregon Land Conservation and Development Commission, or LCDC. Now that's a mouthful. So from now on, I'm just going to refer to these agencies as the state. Creating the new development codes was a pretty lengthy process because cities and counties had to look at all the land around and evaluate it with respect to several different statewide planning goals. Further complementing the effort, though, were 2 county commissioners who were pro-development and generally opposed to the entire land use planning process. It was convoluted even more by proposed legislation in the state legislature to gut the land use laws. And then when the Reagan administration tried to weaken the Army Corps of Engineers rules protecting wetlands. Benton County was one of the first to submit a comprehensive plan So there was little existing precedent to base it upon, and the plan was produced with minimal public involvement. That draft comprehensive plan zoned the 130-acre wetland as exclusive farm use because the land was too swampy to be used for housing development. Keep that in mind. Because while this was all going on, there was a developer who was building the Village Green subdivision down here south of the wetland. And he was putting in low-cost housing over in this new development area. Well, he owned 25 acres that was within the city limits, right adjacent to the wetland. And he wanted to expand into the swamp, north of Village Green, as it was called then. In '78, the developer obtained an option to buy the 130-acre wetland for $500 per acre. He didn't buy it, but he bought the option to buy it. To develop that land, it would have to be incorporated into the Corvallis urban growth boundary. The county would have to rezone it for residential development. And then to connect to the city water and sewer systems, the land would have to be annexed to the city by a public vote. Well, this was kind of complicated in 1980 when the city drew its urban growth boundary right across the south edge of the property so that the property was outside the urban growth boundary. It was removed from the city of Corvallis planning area and was under county regulation. Well, the county comprehensive plan was completed in 1980 and submitted to the state for approval. But in '81, they came back and ordered Benton County to apply Goal 5 protections to open spaces and wetlands. County planning staff and the county commissioners resisted this order. So in 1982, the state rejected the county plan because it had no provision for protecting endangered species. So back to the drawing board. Now, to make it even more interesting, the Nature Conservancy, Bob Frankel was and Bob and Liz were in the Nature Conservancy. The Conservancy offered to purchase the wetland from the developer for $250,000, 3.8 times what the developer paid for it or was going to pay for it. The developer didn't take the offer. He said, no, he might sell part of the land for preservation, but he wanted to develop the rest. Then in early 1982, the Conservancy withdrew the offer, saying the entire property should be preserved. And then they'd also found out that he was going to pay $500 for per acre, and they weren't going to pay him $2,000. But an agreement was reached in July of 1982 to sell 90 acres to the Nature Conservancy. The developer would then develop additional land to the east of the wetland that he had options on. The deal was dependent upon the land being annexed into the city. And the developer thought selling part of the land to the Nature Conservancy would appeal to preservationists and improve the chance of an annexation. Now, this went on and on for a number of years, but eventually their owner rejected the Nature Conservancy's offer, saying the proposed selling price was too low. He wanted $4,000 an acre, or 8 times what he was going to pay for it. And he insisted that it wasn't a wetland anyway, but it was buildable property worth $15,000 per acre, 30 times what he was going to pay for it. Well, in February of 1982, a task force that was appointed by the county commissioners, it was created to inventory natural areas. And they decided that none of the wetland was worth preserving. It said between 12 and 20 acres of the wetland, but it was already protected from development by existing farm use zoning. But next month, Bob Frankel and several other wetland scientists testified to the county commission that the entire wetland provided habitat for rare plants and many other plants and animals. It helped control flood runoff and should be preserved as open space. Okay, now we're seeing this argument between development and preservation. But in May of '82, the Board of Commissioners declared that only 14 acres of the property had sufficient environmental value as a wetland area. They declined to change the zoning, saying they didn't want to interfere with negotiations between the developer and the Nature Conservancy. Later that year, the developer requested an amendment to the brand new county comprehensive plan for a zone change to residential. And he requested the city to change the city's new land use plan to place the wetland inside the urban growth boundary. The state came back and said, you can't do that. You already have enough area inside the urban growth boundary for future housing. So again, the state said, you can't develop it. Arguments over this continued for a couple of years, developer claiming it wasn't a wetland because it was bone dry in the summer, and numerous scientists testified about the wetland characteristics, and the planning commission argued there were no endangered species there, and botanists came back and said, well, then what's this? Look, here they are. The state approved the land use plan in early 1984 with the stipulation that the county must protect the Jackson-Fraser wetland. Hello, county government, are you listening? In 1984, the developer gained title to the property, even though it was outside the urban growth boundary and zoned for farm use, for $500 an acre. He did it through a land exchange, and he claimed he had several $100,000 invested and wanted to get it back from the Jackson-Fraser land. Now, the real problem here is that the county commissioners and the county council thought the state order that the wetland be zoned open space took away the owner's rights and amounted to a taking without paying fair value for the land. This is prohibited in the Oregon and U.S. constitutions. If the county did not comply, the state could cut off money the county received from alcohol, cigarette, and gasoline taxes. On the other hand, if the county did zone the land open space, the landowner could sue to recover the lost value of the land. At this point, the State Land Commission staff said that Jackson-Fraser had become the focal point of the regulatory taking dispute in Oregon. So in late 84, the County Planning Commission recommended 8-1 to defy the state and keep the land zoned for exclusive farm use. The head of the commission said he saw no rare plants, and there was nothing but weeds on the land. A group of wetland scientists led by Bob Frankel disagreed, saying very few areas in the state qualified as wetlands and the land should be protected. The Board of Commissioners decided against zoning the area open space and to leave it zoned for agriculture. That wouldn't take away the owner's rights to use the land, but they also established a fund that people could donate to purchase the land, to preserve it. And if that didn't raise enough money, the county would submit a bond issue to the voters to purchase the property. Now, they hoped this would satisfy the state. So the county hired an assessor that just happened to have been recommended by the developer. And the land was assessed at $4,000 an acre, or 8 times what the developer had paid for it a year earlier. The county put the levy on the ballot to raise the money to purchase the land, and in September of 85, it was defeated by a 2.41 to 1 margin. Opponents said the land was zoned for farming when the developer bought it and could not be developed. It was not within the urban growth boundary, so it wasn't eligible for city services that you needed for a development. Yet the developer was demanding a price for developable land. Even the environmental groups opposed it, saying they were taxpayers too, and the county shouldn't be bailing out a failing developer with an exorbitant sum of public money. Well, after that, everybody blamed everyone else for the failure to protect the wetland. Then in mid-November 1985, the owner began plowing and draining the most sensitive area to destroy the natural features. He said that since the land was zoned for farming, he was going to farm it to raise money to pay the taxes. However, he told the state legislative committee He had plowed the land to prevent the state from ordering the county to rezone the property. He admitted it was an attempt to block preservation of the wetland, saying, quote, "We have really wiped out the sensitive area," unquote. Now this area down here, you see where it's marked furrowed area, that's the part that he plowed, and then he built this berm, a dike, across the land to prevent water from flowing down into this area. And he put in a bunch of ditches to drain the wetlands off into the lands to the east. Well, he did this without getting any permits for fill and removal. Oregon State Land Division and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers said he had violated state and federal waterway laws. The state again ordered the county to take measures to protect the wetlands. The state issued a cease and desist order and a restoration order to the developer and asked the Benton County District Attorney to start criminal proceedings against the developer for violating a state law protecting wetlands. The county's response was, "Hey, Corvallis, we want you to extend the urban growth boundary to take in 320 acres around the wetland. 106 acres of the wetland would be preserved as open space, and the remaining 200 plus acre area would be zoned residential so the developer could develop it." County government really wanted this guy to be able to develop something. Well, in March of 1986, the Corvallis City Council came back and said, "Hey, we don't want any part in this." The city attorney cautioned that the developer threatened to sue everyone involved in the case, and if the city took any action, it could become involved. So the developer's threats came around to bite him. Then in June '86, on question about the prosecution, the county district attorney, who worked for the county commissioners, said he was delaying prosecution because there was a lot of paperwork that had to be gone through. Okay, if that wasn't interesting enough, in order to buy this land, the developer had taken out a mortgage on it. And in early '86, a $118,000 mortgage came due, and the developer didn't have the money. But the bank granted a 60-day extension. So the county scheduled a sheriff's auction in April to sell the property to pay the outstanding loan. But the landowner sold other property he had and used it to pay off the loan. Can you say throwing good money after bad? Then the developer appealed the state cease and desist order and sued the Benton County District Attorney to prevent prosecution. He filed this appeal in the Marion County Circuit Court, and in August, the court refused to block the state enforcement orders. They said it's perfectly legal. So then, after the state threatened criminal prosecution, he repaired the plowed land and then moved to Reno, Nevada. The district attorney said he would not prosecute because the damage had been repaired, but in fact, it had not. Well, then in September of '86, the state gave the county 9 more months to find a way to protect the wetland. The county commissioners decided to adopt a do-nothing approach and leave the land zone for exclusive farm use, saying state and federal rules will prevent negative impacts to the wetland. And for some reason, the state land board approved this decision in February of 1987. In May of '87, this decision was appealed by 1,000 Friends of Oregon who had pushed through the land use laws, by the Portland and Corvallis Audubon Societies, the Native Plant Society of Oregon, and Robert and Elizabeth Frankel. Then in August of '88, the Oregon Court of Appeals ruled that Benton County had failed to comply with state land use rules to protect the wetland. because it was assuming other agencies would deny farm uses on land zoned as farmland. Okay, in one last desperate effort to make some money out of this deal, in August of '88, the landowner offered to sell the Jackson Fraser property to county for a bargain, $168,000, or just shy of $1,300 per acre. The county refused, saying, well, the state says you can't develop that land, so the market value is really only $100 an acre. And that kind of brought all of this back and forth to an end. So in '88, Benton County announced foreclosure proceedings on the land for failure to pay $30,000 in back taxes. The owner had 2 years to pay the taxes, but he didn't. So in October of 1990, the county foreclosed on the land and it became county property. Then on the 6th of February 1991, 10 years after the state ordered the county to protect the wetland, the county rezoned 131 acres of the wetlands as open space and put a wetland overlay zone on the entire 147 acres that the developer had lost. This fulfilled Land Conservation Development Commission requirements to protect the wetland. Oh, and by the way, in the meantime, the voters had booted out the 2 pro-development commissioners, and we had a new county commission. So now that the county had the property, it needed to do something with it. So in 1992, a management plan was developed by a committee that was headed by Bob Frankel. And in 1993, the county placed the Jackson Fraser wetland in the Department of Natural Areas and Park Department. In late 1993, an access bridge was built across the creek running south, Village Green Creek, and the kiosk there was built. And at the same time, they mowed a loop trail around the part of the area for public access. This wasn't the boardwalk, it was just a trail. And in the winter, it was underwater. That was in '93. In 1995, they started looking at putting in a boardwalk. They built a test section in late '95 of a design that was supposed to be something that volunteers could build. So they built a test section. And then in 1996, work started on the boardwalk. Bob Frankel led a public fundraising project. Environmental Protection Agency, individual contribution, and grants from other agencies helped fund the boardwalk. The National Guard and several volunteer groups helped with the boardwalk construction. So on 3 October 1998, the county held a celebration for the completion of the boardwalk and to open the wetland to the public. Over the next few years, the new management plan was implemented. The Fish and Wildlife Service provided funding for the restoration work, and Oregon Parks Foundation provided funding for interpretation. Some native ash and non-native roses had spread across much of the wet prairie, along with blackberry, reed canary grass, and other invasive species. So the restoration program eliminated the invasive species as much as possible and opened up the wet prairie for native wetland species. This map shows the current boundaries of the wetland. In 2003, a 4-acre section was added to the wetland down here and donated by the Greenbelt Land Trust. And a 10-acre section up here that the Fraser Creek flowed through was given to the county by the owner of the land north of the wetlands. You can also see where Owens Farm is now. The ownership of Owens Farm today is the City of Corvallis. Get back to that. The Greenbelt Land Trust and Good Samaritan Hospital. In 2005, a new management plan was developed again under Bob Frankel's leadership. And so for the next 10 years or so, the county worked to take out shrubs and trees and clear the area of invasive vegetation. At the same time, Students at the nearby Sheldon Middle School were growing threatened and endangered species to be planted at Jackson Fraser. In 2016, a new wetland enhancement project was proposed for Jackson Fraser. This was led by Adam Stebbins, the Benton County Natural Area Resources Coordinator. He wanted to fully implement that 2005 plan. The goals were to restore wetland hydrology, to increase soil saturation, and to restore vegetation diversity through woody plant reduction, invasive weed control, and native vegetation seeding, and to increase environmental education and outreach properties. So it was this area down here that had been ditched, was tilled so it doesn't have ditches anymore. The berm was removed so water can flow into the area, and these ditches were filled in that the previous owner had put in. Phase 1 of that restoration project was completed in 2017. A lot of invasive species were eradicated. And the county funded this. Then in 2018, the Oregon Water Enhancement Board gave a grant for phase 2 of the project. 50 acres were to be restored. That started in 2018, but we had to stop and delay because we still hadn't gotten rid of the invasive reed canary grass. So we spent a year digging that stuff out. And then in 2019, phase 2 started and was completed in 2020. The berm across the southern part of the wetlands was removed and the drainage ditches were filled. Many species of native wetland plants were planted throughout the restoration area. So it's going to be interesting to see what this looks like over the next few years as all these native plants come back into the area. The generous Frankel donation provided funds for phase 3 of the project, including restoration work, interpretive signs, and a replacement boardwalk. This time, the cost of replacing the boardwalk is not known. Part of the reconstruction project will include extensive restoration work inside the current boardwalk loop to remove invasive species, especially reed canary grass. The current plan is to remove half of the old boardwalk loop. Then the area under the walkway will be treated to remove invasive species and promote native species. After the restoration work is complete, the new half of the boardwalk will be built. Then the second half of the old boardwalk will be removed, the land will be restored, and a new section of boardwalk constructed, completing the new boardwalk loop. Now, the first step is to determine what kind of construction will be used. There are a number of different designs and materials that are used for boardwalks, and we need to decide what is the best combination for Jackson Fraser. The next step is deciding where to build a new boardwalk. The existing route is an obvious choice because the visitors are familiar with it and the permits are already in place for the boardwalk. But rules have changed in the last 23 years since the existing boardwalk was built. If the height above ground exceeds a minimum requirement, a high railing will be needed at the sides of the walk. This would be an ugly visual intrusion into the wetland scenery, and it'd be expensive. I mean, Bob Frankel designed this original boardwalk to be hidden by the normal vegetation there. So we don't want these big railings sticking up. When the costs are known, we will raise funds and do the construction. Now, if sufficient funding is available, the boardwalk could be extended into another loop, increasing the length of the walk and enhancing the wetlands experience. This will require an engineering survey to route the walk low enough to the ground to avoid having to add that railing. And it will need additional permits. All that costs money. Grant funding will be sought using the remaining Frankel funds as matching money. Public fundraising campaign is also being considered, using the successful Wildcat Park fundraising campaign as a model. That's the idea, is to sell pieces of it to the public. You want to buy a section of the boardwalk? The more money we can raise, the longer the new boardwalk will be, and with sufficient public support, the remaining Frankel money can be used to complete the restoration work and interpretive signing. In 1991, Bob and Liz Sprinkle received the Richard Neuberger Award for Environmental Achievement from the Oregon Environmental Council, to a large part because of their work to save Jackson Fraser wetland. In 2005, Benton County dedicated the boardwalk to Bob and named it the Bob Sprinkle Boardwalk. Thereafter, he was known as Boardwalk Bob. We can be thankful for the donations Bob and Liz gave to restore, improve, and maintain the wetland, but their gift to us was much more than money. Without them, there would be no Jackson Fraser wetland today. Let's hope their example inspires others to preserve natural areas throughout the Willamette Valley. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this. And I would like to thank Don Boucher, and Barry Wolf for allowing me to use their photos. So Bonnie, can we go to the next part of the presentation now?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much. That was really fascinating to hear that history. I didn't know much of that, so that was really interesting to me. This would be a really great time if you have questions or comments for Phil or Dave, please share those with us. I do have just a few to start with, and hopefully we'll get some more in because we do have some time to chat. Ray just says, I would love a boardwalk extension. So would I. That would be wonderful. Marjorie asks, are you willing to provide the names of the pro-development county commissioners? Do you have any of those?
I'm not sure. I think
it's public information. It's public information.
It's public.
You can look it up. We don't have to give it.
I got it out of the newspaper.
Okay. Gotcha. And Annette has an interesting question. Won't the treatment of invasive plants create a hazard for the native species?
Yes and no. One of the funny things that came out of the owner's ditching of the land, he was trying to eradicate the endangered species there. Well, it turns out that Bradshaw's lomatium actually likes disturbed land, and the whole population bloomed. And so what we recently did, of course, eliminated a lot of the stuff that was growing there because a lot of it was invasive species. And we didn't want to go into wetland and just spray herbicides everywhere. So we have reseeded that land with a whole variety of plants that early inventory showed that were on the land. So the whole idea now is to restore the vegetation that was there back before all of this began.
Gotcha. Kristen asks, what can people do now in 2021 to help? Is there a contact list people can be put on for future updates?
No, but I think we can do that. You can get some information about it through the AFRANA website. AFRANA is the Alliance for Recreation and Natural Area. It's a friends group for parks and natural areas in Benton County. And just Google AFRANA.org, and there is some information on there now. There certainly will be when we get to the point we want to start this public fundraising campaign. And some of this information is occasionally posted on the county Natural Areas, Parks and Events Department website. If you go in there, you can find the county's habitat conservation plan, you can find the management plan for Jackson Fraser, and you can find the phase 1, phase 2 plan that they're posted online. And basically we'll be following those plans.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. Let's see. Deb says, thank you, thank you, thank you. see. And she'd be happy to volunteer when the time comes. Wonderful. And then Susan asks, is a plant list available for the native plants on Jackson Fraser wetland?
Yes, it is. If you look on the Jackson Fraser Management Plan that's on the county website, in the back of that, they have plants, animals, insects, and whatever lists out there. By the way, Dave sent me something yesterday. They discovered a new species out at Jackson Fraser that's been found on only 2 places in Oregon. Seems to be really common back east. But so it's another caddisfly. That won't be in the insect list.
Okay, let's see. Michelle says the boardwalk is extremely slippery in cold weather, even in the 40s. Please keep that in mind when selecting materials for the new boardwalk, which will be great. That's something to think about. Thank you for that feedback. Paul asks, do you anticipate volunteer opportunities in the future to help with restoration work, e.g. planting native species, removing invasive species, assisting with the boardwalk planning, etc.? How would you find out about such opportunities if they exist?
For that, contact the Benton County Natural Areas, Parks and Events Department. And Adam Stebbins is the fellow who's really pushing this. I mean, he's the one who decided that we really need to restore this wetlands. So, and I thank Adam for it. He took the leadership on that. So you can contact Benton County Natural Areas, Parks and Events Department if you want to volunteer. Now we use volunteers from Sheldon Middle School sometimes, because they're only a couple blocks away. This is sort of like their backyard. So yes, we would like to, in fact, Adam wants to establish a volunteer cadre to help work out there.
Thank you. And I have been sharing, you may have noticed, I've been sharing some of these links into the chat. So the contact there for Benton County Natural Areas and Parks and a few others are there. So hopefully that'll help people out. Loretta asks, what are the techniques for eradicating reed canary grass? Also, I still see this plant being planted in home gardens and developments. Is there any work being done to educate folks to not plant this invasive species?
Well, you know, the state has a list of plants that you shouldn't use, but a lot of the nurseries still sell this stuff. Reed canary grass is especially nasty. You notice I mentioned it several times because it puts an extensive root system down deep into the soil. So if you mow it, it's a grass. It doesn't care. It'll grow right back. You have to go down and dig the roots out. And that's one of the reasons that this latest treatment was really drastic. For 10 years, they've been trying to eliminate reed canary grass by cutting and spot spraying and whatever, and it just wasn't working. So part of the restoration project was to go out where these dense clumps were and literally dig it all out of the ground. Now, this had a secondary effect. Since we're restoring the water flow over the area, it will have created what are called vernal pools that will dry up in the summer. And there's a whole collection of native plants that grow that prefer vernal pools. So hopefully we've gotten rid of the reed canary grass, but it ain't all gone because it comes down Jackson Creek, Fraser Creek. The seeds come downstream from upstream sources. So there's going to be a continuing fight forever.
Thank you. Rochelle asks, how long do you think it will take the new native plants to grow and the variety of birds that were there in the past to return?
Well, those pictures, I showed some pictures out of the birds that were taken just a few weeks ago. Those egrets, I went out there one day and there were egrets all over this place, and more than I'd ever seen. And because there's so much water there, there's habitat for frogs. So there should be a lot more egret and heron food out there now than there had been in the past. And there were quite a few mallard ducks there and some pintails. So they're already back. Now, some of the plants, for example, camas, this must have been a camas prairie 200 and some odd years ago. And I know from personal experience and experience with Native Plant Society, if you put camas seeds out there, it's going to be 5 to 7 years before you see a flower. The leaves will come up right away, but the plants take years to build up a bulb big enough before they start making seed. Some of the other things that have been planted out there should be blooming very soon. The seed should germinate. We've done this in other areas. Bob Frankel led efforts down in Finley Refuge years ago, kind of preliminary studies of how to do this. And we also, Adam also planted a lot of camas bulbs, and they're already sprouting. I was out there a month and a half ago and walked through the open area before it flooded, and I could find the camas there. So, like I said, it will be interesting to see what comes up in the next 5 years. I hope to see the pictures I showed you here while I was talking. All of those are species that are found at Jackson Fraser. So I'm hoping to see a lot of those popping up everywhere out there. But it takes time. The native plants don't care about our schedules. They're on their own schedules. You just have to live with it.
Thank you. Ellen says something handy that I'll also put into the chat. If you would like to be included on an email update list, she says you can send an email to info at, I'm not sure how to say the acronym, afrana.com. And so I will put that into the chat so people can do that. And then I've got this just interesting comment that I want to share from Anne Frankel. This is Anne Frankel, Bob and Liz's daughter. She wants to say she loved hearing the entire detective story laid out like this. She never really had the full picture quite like this. She also remembers the frantic phone call on the day that the developer started plowing the wetland. Both parents went into immediate action. Yes. I love that. I wanted to share that. And then there was some more questions. Betty asked, what development fights might be in the future for Corvallis? Pro-development sentiments definitely exist.
Well, there's a fuss going on right now over a failed addition to Witham Hill Natural Area. The thing about wetlands like Jackson Fraser is that they're never big enough. When we started the Greenbelt Land Trust, that's the first thing Charlie Ross said, you've got to, more is better. And so if you can add to an existing natural area, you actually increase the number of species that will support. And the city had another 13 to 20 acres of woodland out at Witham Hill Natural Area that the developer adjacent was going to donate because he's not in the business of managing natural areas. And for reasons, city government didn't take it. So we have, the government always is has to look at development. It had, you don't want runaway development, uncontrolled, just a mess. So they tend to focus on that. You have to really have experience in natural area management and everything to understand what it takes to manage natural areas. And don't ever pass up an opportunity to expand an existing natural area.
If I can mention here to follow up on what Phil just said, we did have a city official within the last 2 years go before the the state legislature, expressing concern that we have a problem in Corvallis, that we have too many wetlands, and that they need to loosen up the regulations on development. So we have a problem. We have a big problem here, and if individuals and organizations who care about wetlands and understand, it's just that people don't seem to understand about wetlands and how important they are to our very lives. And if you care about Kalapuya at all, you would be protecting the wetlands. And a lot of our governing people do not understand that. And we have to be vigilant. We have to be transparent, we have to agitate, we have to educate, we have to do all these things to make sure people understand the importance of the wetlands, just like the Frankels did. And Anne and Stephen Frankel, thank you for being in watching, and you will be on the Q&A at our next one on Mary's Peak, which is coming up, a gift for Mary's Peak, which is coming up on April 21st. I hope you can all attend. Thank you.
Yes, definitely.
And thank you, Phil.
Thank you. Thank you all. We have a few more questions, but we're not going to have time to get to them this time. But thanks everyone for being here. I'll go ahead and sign us off. And just one quick correction. I believe the email address I provided for AFRANA is .org, not .com. So
Right.
there's a .com in there. It's info@afrana.org. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Yes.